He is the athletic director, football coach at John Paul II High School in Plano, former Alabama great, also hell of a player with the Dallas Cowboys, Green Bay Packers in the NFL, and even the Atlanta Falcons. George Teague joins us on 365 Sports. We'll get to his alma mater in a minute, college football in a minute. George, did Jerry do it right with Mike McCarthy?
Well, yeah. Hello, man.
Hey, what's up?
Thank you for going in. You know what? This is a hard one for me, right? I don't know that we actually got this one right. Honestly, I think that what you're trying to accomplish as a team at a National Football League is always trying to win the title and the championship, and I don't think that that we've seen enough out of McCarthy and the staff. I think this should have been a better year. We should have went a little further. I know things happen in games, but I think when you look throughout the course of the season, there were things that weren't addressed that should have been addressed. So maybe that's not Mike McCarthy's fault. Maybe that's the scouting department's fault or Jerry Jones's fault. But when you don't address things like the linebacker play and the size that we had or lack of size that we had, and we were giving up runs in the biggest parts of the season, that was a problem. When you look at the lack of depth maybe that we had on the offensive line and we couldn't run the ball when we needed to, when you knew certain guys were going to be hurt throughout the year, we didn't address those. So I don't know if that's a head coach's issue, scouting issue, but I feel like something needs to change so that this doesn't happen again.
George, it feels to me like if you look at the Cowboys' playoff losses and the way that or when they lose against, big games on the road against good teams, it appears that if it doesn't go according exactly to their script, they don't adapt very well. As where, and I know that this is kind of an extreme comparison, but the reason Patrick Mahomes is so great is that he doesn't need a script. Josh Allen doesn't need a script. Joe Burrow doesn't seem to need a script. That as long as you keep it close, those guys can really do it. But the Cowboys, it seems like if it doesn't go exactly their way, the wheels fall off and it doesn't go that way. How do you correct that? Because that seems more like not a coaching issue as far as X's and O's, but more of a confidence issue.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I'm going to toss that back into, I think that confidence has to come from within the locker room, the coach, right? So here's my best example, right? So when I am coaching a football game and we've had to face very tough opponents at a neutral site or somewhere else, we're constantly talking about the what ifs. What if this happens when we're at Nolan Catholic or Bishop Lynch or St. Thomas? How are we going to mentally handle this when something does not go right? Because it's not going to always be right. There is a chance the quarterback's going to throw an interception or, we're going to muff a punt. We have to be mentally prepared for these deals. And the amount of money that we're putting into stuff like that, sports science, all this kind of stuff, and we're talking about professional teams, I really don't think there should be an excuse of why there's such a gap in the way that you play at home versus when you're away. Yes, you got to find players that can do that when you're drafting, and you got to understand their mindset, but you still have to continually train on that. What is it going to be when you go to elements, when it's cold, or when it's very, very hot? You have to be mentally prepared for that. So, again, I'm not saying it's all McCarthy's fault. It's an organizational deal where you have to look and evaluate hard and say, why did we? I'm speaking as a fan now at this point, not necessarily as an analyst. So why didn't we address that so that we don't have these letdowns at very, very big moments in games like the playoffs?
George, is culture an overrated word, overused word, or is it the word?
I think it is the word. It can sound very cliche, and trust me, I get tired of hearing about it sometimes when I'm here at JP2. Our culture has to look like this and feel like this. What does that mean? It's so ambiguous, right? We don't really know what that means. But I do know that you can establish certain part of things. You know what kind of culture you can create on a football team, that when we run the doggone football, it's going to be super physical. We don't care who's in the way. They can put 8 guys in a box, 9 guys in a box. We're going to run the doggone ball. That's Ravens, right? There's certain teams. The Packers, when they came to us, we don't care. Y'all got 8 guys in here. To me, you can say it's a mindset, but that's kind of a culture that you're building. I don't know. I don't feel like we were kind of that way.
Okay.
What do we? Same way with stopping the run. How can it be so good that we could stop a team like, I don't know, Detroit, slow them down a little bit, and others, but then you play someone like Arizona or, how does someone hit for 200 yards? What the heck is that? What? It doesn't match. It doesn't correlate. So originally, and I will say this, I did have some sources that I talked to early in the year because, I do the stuff with CBS.
Right.
And they had told me that, we were getting too complicated on defense, that Dan was trying to get a little too snazzy, that not doing what they were doing, and they needed to get back to who they were. I 100% agreed, and when he did, I could see it change. Hey, he went back to the basics. I feel like maybe in this last playoff game, he got a little anxious again. Hey, we got to do this. We know we're a little small. They do this, and then maybe it got too complicated, and the team wasn't who they had been, until all those weeks building up into this playoff game.
You arrived with the Cowboys in '96, the summer of '96, and played on the team that was really good, but there was a lot of distractions. I think that's the year that, was it Williams that had the car wreck and some other things that were going on. But did you ever think that would be the last? Well, and you didn't play in the Super Bowl, but did you ever think it would still be a streak where the Cowboys had not been back to a championship game since the year before you arrived?
No, not at all. That's unbelievable. If you would have asked me that, even with our, average years or so, was it going to be like this for the Dallas Cowboys? That would have been absolutely not. Just because of the trend that it started, the culture that had been set by Jimmy Johnson. Early on, he put together a good formula, and I think that's when you see the rant by Michael Irvin or something talking about that. They always say as old heads we have something to say. Right, but is the truth in the fact that there was something about wearing the star on the side of the helmet, and everybody knows the pressures of being on this team. I knew it coming from Green Bay, and there's a lot of tradition in Green Bay. It was different being here with the Cowboys. Yes, I went to the Falcons. Wasn't there very long, but it was different, and not in a good way. I mean, even the Dolphins, where Jimmy Johnson was, and he was trying to create that, it wasn't the same city. They didn't love football the exact same way. So for us to not have a good, deep playoff run since, the late 90s, that's kind of unbelievable to me. I think it hit me the hardest with my son, who's 30 now. Says, yeah, I kind of know about the Cowboys, but, what y'all haven't really won, or we haven't really won since I was, 3. So why do I need to be a fan? This kind of thing. And it kind of shook me a little bit because it hit me home. Hit it home real fast.
You say you like this house you live in? That's why.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
But George, do you get? I know people are going to ask you about T.O. all the time and that moment at the Star, but does it change where you are in the country? Like if you're in Alabama, if you're at Tuscaloosa, they're probably not going to ask you about T.O. They're going to ask you about running down Lamar Thomas, right? Mm-hmm. Does it just depend on what kind of fan encounters you, asks you about one of those two moments?
Yes, but I would say most of the time. So the Alabama players definitely more centric. It doesn't mean they don't talk about it here, but it's probably more Alabama fans who may remember it or something of that nature. When I'm in Alabama, I may get heavy dose of that national championship game, but inevitably they always talk about Terrell Owens and the hit as well, just because they're probably also NFL fans in some aspect, and Terrell Owens is from Alabama, right up the street, Thomasville, Alabama, not too far from Tuscaloosa anyway. So I kind of get hit with both heavily in Alabama, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And although I get them hit, both of them here is probably Terrell Owens first. And then if they know about my history, they'll say, well, yeah, I remember that as well. So it's kind of reversed on how it plays out by part of the country. If I'm out in Virginia somewhere, mm-hmm. it's all Terrell Owens. It's pros. It's stuff like that.
George, the 92 team that won the national title and you beat Miami, that play against Lamar Thomas was called back, but would have been a touchdown perhaps. And then they don't accept the penalty and they score, which is overlooked at times, but you had a big pick in that game earlier. So, Gene Stallings, what did he mean to you? And there was a get-together. Somebody in the chat room that we have here on our YouTube channel mentioned some sort of a gathering with Gene Stallings. Were you able to get back? Do you get to go back to those reunions, so to speak? And what was that like?
Yes, absolutely. And can you imagine how much money I might have made? There was NIL deals back in the day after that. How much money I could have kept them paying. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, I have seen Coach Stallings. I'm able to call and speak to him some as well because he's out in Paris. So he's always opened up his place to former players. Hey, come on out to the ranch, hang out. But it was great to really be around him. So we had our 30th anniversary, a 30-year reunion of the national championship, just a season ago. And we were all there. And it was really good to see him. And he and I are pretty, I'm going to say close in the sense that, he was a good secondary father figure to me, asking me about the wife, about the kids and everything else. And he's always been that type of guy. So I got to be around him, and I'm almost an ambassador with it from the team because he's so stubborn right now. Now he has that old man stubbornness too, right? He don't want to sit down, and everybody knows he needs to sit down. So everybody's like, "Hey, Teague, can you get him to? We don't want him to fall. We don't want him to do something. We need to get him in the golf cart." And so I would always be the one to have to go talk to him, and he would always come back at this event and say, "Teague, I'm not sitting down, son." I'm like, "Coach, you need to be." He's like, "No, what you got to do as a man now when people are talking to you, you don't sit down and look up at their face. You stand up and you look them in the eye." So he's still doing this same thing. He said, "So I'm not going to sit down, so quit asking me." I said, "Okay, Coach, my bad." So it's kind of cool that he still thinks of us the same way.
I early on in my career I was given a list by my co-host and said, "Hey, look, call these people. They're all Texas sports legends and try to get them on the show." And so I went home and I was talking to my dad, and my dad is an Aggie. So he said, "Well, you got to call Gene Stallings." And so I called Gene Stallings and I left a message, and my phone rang about 2 hours later. He was out, feeding cows or whatever he was doing. And the voice like, "Paul, this is Gene Stallings returning your call about being on the show." And my heart leapt out of my chest hearing the voice. What was it like being recruited by him and hearing that voice on the other end of the phone?
So my situation is a little bit different here, and a lot of people don't know this. So I was not actually recruited by Gene Stallings. I was recruited by Bill Curry. So when we started talking about transfer portal and all this kind of leaving, I kind of have good stories about what that means when your head coach leaves your very first year there at the program. So I actually came in under the Bill Curry deal. Gene Stallings came my sophomore year, my second year, and I finished with him. So he still brought a different presence, as much as I love Bill Curry and the staff, discipline, hard work, all the common words that you hear, Coach Stallings brought a different piece. He's very hard-nosed, very Barry Bryant-like still, right? Just we're going to be a tough-nosed football team. We're going to run. We're going to hit hard and all that. But what he did differently for us, I think, is he taught us really more of how to be men, like literally. What did it mean to be a praying man? It was important to him that we ate, and he actually was teaching us how to say a blessing, how to say grace. You know what I mean? It was really important to him to talk to us about, okay, are you calling your mom? What are you saying to your girlfriend? Are you still opening the door? These kind of things. Hey, guys, I don't need you to be asleep at 10, but I need you to take care of the teammates and make sure we're all back in the dorm at 10. Go to bed at 11 or 12. I just need you off the streets. You guys got to hold each other accountable to that. And I think that really led to our success because it really taught family values, like true family and family value from the team, and how do you build and mold and help guys. So I'm very thankful to him, and I'm very thankful that he came, that I could play with him, because even now he's saying exactly the same stuff, to me now. His first question is always, how's your wife, Consuelo? I don't even know how he remembers, or no, I don't remember people's stuff. What about your kid? I remember you had your son. How's your son? Oh, he's right over here. Oh, great. Bring him over here. Let me, that kind of thing. So it's pretty awesome.
So can you still do that as a coach, or can you do it well enough with the transfer portal and NIL and more? Or are guys your age and mine, and I'm older than you, I believe, much older, we have to just get used to it?
I think we got to get used to it. I don't think you can do it. I think that's part of the reason, if not all of the reason, why Saban left. You can't really coach for the same piece of, hey, I'm trying to help this person get better, because they're going to turn their back on you, because they're not as interested as, a mom or a dad might have sent them to you to say, hey, man, I need for you to help me watch my kid, make sure he gets graduated in that thing. It's different times. Now the dads and even the moms are like, hey, what can you do for me and my kid now? Can you pay us for this trip to come visit you? What? That wasn't how it used to be. And so now as coaches, you're constantly having to recruit the kids who are in your building. You're trying to blow them up and make them feel the best, but you can't do it with everybody. We ran into some of the same stuff at JP2, right? 100%. When we were really, really loaded, we were making our run to the state championship. There was so much turmoil. I shouldn't say turmoil. It's not the right word. There was so much I had to do to make sure that backup felt like he was part of it. When I would say in older days, it wasn't necessarily the same way. They were happy to be a part of it. Hey, I'm going to get a ring too. I play what I want, but now they want the shine. I was actually having conversations with parents that said, how come his article by David Smoak and the guys and how come their article is longer than mine and it said the other kid's name and that, like, what are you wow. That actually happened. I was like, no, this is not what we're doing. The guy had a good game. He had 3 touchdowns or whatever. We don't have to talk about every single kid. That doesn't mean that you're not loved. So then they want to leave. Well, I can go over here. I can be the guy. I want the guy with the write-up. I want the bigger check. It is extremely hard for coaches nowadays, even in high school, to be able to stay focused with, just trying to put the best product out there on the field.
George, do you think Alabama made a good hire bringing in Kalen DeBoer? He's won literally everywhere he's been.
I'm very supportive of the hire. I think it's a great thing to do. And, it takes power in the university to be able to go steal a coach that just came off of a state, a national championship run as well. I think he's hiring well and all that. I do think he has a different hurdle because of the stuff we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Half the roster is going to look. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Not even half the roster. More than half the roster is probably going to look different than it did last year. So that puts a very big challenge on Coach DeBoer to try to get the scholarship kids in, the portal in. It's another piece that he has to go work that is so much harder that maybe he expected it. I'm not sure. But you don't even really know what spring football is going to be like because the portal's going to close and then it's going to open back up. And, it can look different again by the end of April, or May, that kind of thing. So I think he has a big challenge, not to necessarily try to fill his shoes, but there's some of that, filling Saban's shoes I'm talking about. But just with the way college football is right now, he's got his back. I hope that we, as fans and the university, can give him time to be able to say, no, this can't be a 4-win season. I'm not saying that at all.
No, yeah.
But if it's a 2-loss season, that's okay, in my opinion, or 3. Because I thought we were going to lose 2 or 3 this year, honestly, when we first started. And I really think that with the way the SEC is going to be aligned next year with the new quads and all this kind of stuff, there are going to be teams that lose 2 games just because of strength of schedule.
George, I've always asked former players who become coaches this, and I don't know if I've ever asked you this before. Was it difficult initially because of how good you were when you played at Alabama high school and then also Alabama, then also in the NFL, to become a coach and be patient?
No, absolutely not. Because I've been around some of my compadres who were, the same way, to have no patience and no stuff, and aren't really good high school coaches or college coaches. There are people that just can't relate. They can't even teach the information. So I think that's a bad myth. I think it helps for us to be able to understand, pain, tiredness, complexities of the game and that kind of stuff. But I think it takes a certain kind of mindset for you to be able to take something from out of your brain, put it on a whiteboard, and then get it to translate onto a field. That's hard to do. And it takes a person to do that. It just so happens that I think I get a small upper hand because I can say, hey, man, because I can ask, what, and they know I'm genuine. If this is confusing, you need to tell me this is doggone confusing. Because I remember when one time the coach was asking me, and I couldn't grasp it, and I need for you to tell me that if you can't grasp it, I'm okay with that because I know what that feels like in the game where my head's about to explode. Now I'm playing slow and then I'm crying at the end of the game and all that. That's not what I want. I need for you to open up and tell me, Coach, we're really, really tired today. We had tests, whatever. You killed us in the weight room. Don't BS me, but tell me the truth. That's what I can bring to them. They can go, oh, okay, he gets it. Because then I can also turn around like, come on, guys. Y'all are lollygagging today.
Yep.
I gave y'all a rest. For a couple of days. We didn't run. We didn't do anything. So what's the issue? And then they pick it up. That kind of thing.
Last thing, if you don't mind, you moved around the country. Your dad, your Air Force brat. A lot of military brats can relate to that. We can too. But you ended up in Montgomery. That's where you played high school football. How much Monday was Martin Luther King Day with the history of MLK and Montgomery? How much of that did you soak in when you lived in Montgomery?
No, it's huge. It was huge. More than anywhere that I've been. I know they try to teach it in the books, history books, but living in Montgomery and being right in the heart of civil rights, movements and, 45 minutes from Selma, and the infamous bridge, and driving over it, is impeccable. And it was so different for me, guys. I know he's not asking me this, but if I could just say that it's so different living in Alabama, particularly in Montgomery and those areas where there's so much history like that. and in the 80s when I was growing up there was still a lot of racial tension and division, so much so that I was on the first part of desegregation, where I was being bused from the black neighborhood to the white school, that kind of thing. So it was very prevalent to me about that. So growing up like that and understanding when you started talking about Martin Luther King and, the month of February and other things, it just hit a little bit different. Like, man, I was shielded from that, as you said, even on the base. I didn't know the full extent because I didn't care if the families were Mexican or Asian or white or whatever. We just knew Dad never going to go up and go march or fly the plane or do whatever, stuff they were going to do. And we played together in the barracks and right in the yard is a true melting pot. And I absolutely love that. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful to have grown up a brat. But I did get a culture shock when I moved to Alabama. And it's my first time off base, and I had to deal with racial tension for the first time in my life.
I agree with you. Living in all sorts of different places on base or right off the base, and the melting pot is a perfect way to put it. As growing up as a military brat, you didn't even sometimes realize that a lot of that was out there. No matter if in Japan or in Alabama or Kansas or whatever. George, love you, man. Tell everybody where they can get whatever you do. You mentioned CBS. Obviously, you're coaching in Plano. Anything else you want to promote what you do? I know the podcast that you do as well.
Man, our podcast is really taking strides, and there's one thing I would ask everybody to do. You guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Teague Football. This would be great, but since you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and go on over to Teague's Take Podcast. Teague's Take Podcast on YouTube. And we really hit Alabama football and college football very hard, even so much so that we actually do film breakdown. So I think people will actually love to be able to see, and we try to teach like coaches because my son is a defensive coordinator as well. So we're always trying to give people the tidbits on really what they're looking at. Just don't be what do you call them? The armchair
the armchair quarterback.
Yeah. Don't do that. Come listen to Teague's Take, and we'll tell you exactly what's happening and have the evidence on film to back it up.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you. I consider you a tremendous friend. Appreciate what you do, what you did, and what you will do in the future. George Teague, part of a couple